You're listening to Hardscape Growth, a podcast for hungry professionals who want to grow their businesses and level up. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hardscape Growth Show. I'm your host, Alex from TechnoBlock, and today we're joined by Stephen Lisk from Lisk Landscape. They're just outside of Pennsylvania, well, just outside of Philly, really 15 minutes outside of South Philly. And the reason we have you on today, Steve, is because we've been talking about this all season, how it's important to really differentiate your business, build yourself a strong brand, be able to add a lot of value to your customers. And the way that you seem to have done that is by specializing in something that's critical on every single outdoor project, which is stormwater management, that you've made it a key part of your brand, who you are, the services you offer, and it seems to be working out really well for you.
Yes, absolutely. We built this company about 20 years ago. And, stormwater management has basically driven the company the last, I'd say, 12, 13 years. And typically, most of the customers, our clientele, are coming to us first to address their stormwater concerns. And
what was the genesis of that made you say, like, okay, this is the angle that we're going to play going into the market, because it's not the sexiest one.
No, it's not the sexiest one. I would say competition, right? 15 years ago, you could see how everything was so competitive, and it was a rat race to the bottom. And, we kind of fell into it at the same time. We've seen a lot of clients having issues with standing water. That was before and even after new concrete and new paving projects. So we thought if we can educate ourselves and address those drainage concerns and be the guy, twofold, we can take care of both the standing water or the water concerns and also give them the beautiful space that they want to.
So you've built a reputation based on that stormwater management. You today have 17,000 followers on Instagram. You've been featured on the DIY network. You brand yourself as advanced stormwater management. Your services offered are landscape engineering, not landscape construction, although you do it, but you present it as landscape engineering, design, and consult. All that together was born out of being in a competitive market and wanting to not just be fighting on price. What does that mean in terms of the market position that you now occupy? And did it work? Like, did it get you to that market position from the very beginning? Meaning today, you're the guy to call if I have water issues on my property. When you first decided to go down that angle, did it immediately result in that type of customer reaching out to you, or was it kind of a slow go at first?
No, it was a little bit of a slow go. I think we had to build our reputation in the stormwater sector first, right? And that took a lot of time, took a lot of schooling, took a lot of troubleshooting. But once we kind of got the grasp on the stormwater management, obviously we knew the paving aspect of it, right? Hardscaping. So at a certain point, after we kind of developed all them strategies, it just made sense to combine the two, but in the beginning, it was very much a grind. It took a lot of years. I would say it took about 10 years to be the guy, right? Before everybody said, well, these guys are great hardscapers, but at the same time, they also can address these issues, right? But yeah, about 10 years it took total.
So, and you said it was about 12, 13 years ago that you really started getting into it. So it took a decade for you to be the guy, and you've only really been the guy for 2-3 years. So what signs were you seeing that were making you stick to your guns? Like, this is the right way for us to go.
Obviously trial and error, right? Making sure that, let's put the hardscape aside. These people have standing water in the yard or they have water inside the basement, right? It's either going to be fixed or it's not going to be fixed. So it was a lot of trial and error to make sure that when we were resolving the yard issues and when we were waterproofing the basement walls, those problems were gone. Once we knew that, once we were confident and comfortable enough, it goes hand in hand. Hardscaping is essentially the same thing. You have to understand how the water rolls and building a new patio that you're not going to create a water problem. So I would tell you again, it took a while. It took all that confidence in the beginning, about 10 years or so. So once we really kind of went back and attacked the hardscape aspect of it, it was easy. It was easy at that point.
Because one goes hand in hand with the other.
Goes
As soon as I'm building anything outside, I need to think about water's going to hit this thing. Where's it going to go? How am I going to control it so that I don't have problems?
Exactly.
So what I'm taking away from what you're saying is the real answer to why did you stick to your guns and keep saying like stormwater management is going to be our angle of attack for the market here. It's because it's required. Everybody needs it. It's not an option. So because it's that, we're going to keep hammering that nail, and eventually we're going to have that reputation as being the guy for that issue. You have that issue, you call me.
Correct. Yep. And they have to fix it. With pavers, being pretty and you want a beautiful space, like they don't need to do that, right? It's not a necessity. Whereas they have to get the stormwater right. If they don't get that right when they're building the project, they can potentially create a huge problem, whether that's a cracked foundation wall or something that's going to cost significant amount of money. So, it's a priority.
Cool. So, does that shape the type of customer that you do business with then? Like, are the calls kind of like the calls that a plumber gets? Like, I'm trying to not dumb it down, but like, because a plumber will get a call, they're not thinking about like, oh, I want to change the pipes to make them look better. They're like, oh shit, my pipes are leaking. I need to fix it. So is it more you're getting the oh shit calls, or you're getting like these, like, I want to transform my backyard calls?
A little bit of both. I would tell you, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, it was more, hey, I just want to fix this issue, right? And then I still had those customers that looked at us as like, hey, I just want to do this for aesthetic purposes. But I would say the last 3 or 4 years, they understand and can identify us from Instagram and our website to say like, look, if you have a problem in the yard, or if you have a basement issue and you're looking to build an addition or build an outdoor living space, these are the guys that have the technical skills to be able to execute it from phase 1 to phase 2, phase 3.
So those customers, when they're contacting you, are they, I guess, like, do you see a difference between a customer that has a clear understanding of they have some kind of stormwater management challenge that they're trying to address versus a customer who is completely oblivious to it? Or do you not encounter that at all because you put that message out there so much that like people are sensitized to it by the time they actually get on a call with you?
Yeah, I would say 70 to 75% have that knowledge of, look, I know who you are. I know what I need to do. How do we execute that? The other, 25 to 30%, like, they don't know where to start. And they kind of, you kind of got to educate them a little bit. And some of the customers just don't do anything, right? They'll eventually follow us on Instagram and then maybe follow us for 6 months to a year. And then they'll begin to understand what needs to be done. But I would tell you about 70 to 75% know us, been following us, and they're ready to proceed with the process.
So does that mean that your interaction with them is pretty straightforward? Like, there's not a whole lot. Like, well, get me a quote, and then I'll get quotes from 2-3 other guys, and then we'll go back and forth, and I'll try to beat you up on the price, and then finally we'll get this thing done? Or is it, you're the guy, I've been following you for a while, I know that you know what you're doing, so how much, and let's go?
Yeah, I mean, and that's normally like what our first call's about, right? They'll send me photos. I might go out there to look at the issue to begin with and figure out, like, what do you want to do? And I will break down the process for them, depending on what we have to do with engineering, right? Do we need a civil engineer? Do we need a structural engineer? All those costs. Do we need a landscape architect? So I'll separate all those costs, and then, again, you can't always give these people an exact number, but everybody wants to know what is this going to cost? So I try to give a ballpark, right? Depending on, what we have to do to take care of the drainage concerns, the waterproofing concerns, and then obviously the hardscape project. So I always try to give them a dollar amount before they spend, $10,000, $15,000. Because like you don't want to put anybody through that, right? You don't want to put them and make them spend money where they don't have to. But I would say for the most part, yeah, I mean, as long as our price is reasonable, it's like, hey, look, I don't want to mess around. You're the guy. Let's go. Let's do this.
So what's your average project look like then?
It varies. I tell you, it's getting bigger and bigger, but I would say the average project is anywhere from 75 to 150,000 is the average project right now. And aside from we have little, smaller projects, but that's just more stormwater management. And those projects are anywhere from say 10 to 25,000 for stormwater management alone. But the hardscape and the whole package with plantings and stormwater are usually 75 to 150.
Okay. So in that 75 to 150, I have patios, I have walkways. What are, like, tell me all the things that are in there.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand.
Typically you have, outdoor living space consists of pavers, stormwater management, sod, grading, probably a fire pit, maybe like an outdoor grilling station, maybe a pergola, possibly a pavilion, some landscape lighting. Normally irrigation is excluded because we don't do that in-house. Engineering plans and stuff like that, design.
You get the water out, you don't bring any more in.
No. Exactly. So yeah, that's typically what is included.
Good. That makes sense for 75 to 100. I mean, that's still a pretty good size range.
Yeah.
The smaller projects, those stormwater management projects alone, what does that typically comprise?
They're normally just excavation, French drains, dry wells, a little bit of grading. That's about it.
What's the split of your business between the two categories of jobs, I guess?
I could say about 50-50.
Really, eh?
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of calls from the stormwater management side that end up kind of upgrading? Because they get to know you and they're like, oh, well, we're already going to be here. You're going to spend 20, might as well.
Yep. About 10 to 20% of those people.
Really?
Yeah, 10 to 20%, they kind of, they come at us and saying, hey, I got this issue. And then it's all of a sudden, you show them the Instagram or the Facebook or your website, and it's like, oh, wait a second. We want to do that in 1 to 2 years. Okay, well, now that makes sense, because if you're going to do that, it makes sense that you get to start the process and let's start planning this. Because you don't want them to work backwards, right? This way we get all of our ducks in a row. We get all the engineering plans done. We take our soil samples so we know what we're working with. And then, unless it's something urgent, typically we'll just wait that out and do everything in one shot.
I think that's super interesting. So basically 1 in 10 to 1 in 5 jobs that are like, I have a water problem, turn into a full backyard renovation project.
Yeah.
In and around $75,000 to $150,000. That's one of the keys to the differentiation that I find is super opportunistic with what you're doing, because you have customers that are calling you for a need and it's turning into a want. Exactly. And they're not costing you more. Like, your cost of acquisition for that customer is the same.
Exactly.
So it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Go.
No, I was going to say, that probably started happening about 3 years ago. It was mostly, they were completely separate, but yeah, I mean, a lot of them are, and I think that's the power of the Instagram, right? Mm-hmm. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. That has, because how were you able to deliver that message before? YouTube was about the only way. We used to put some videos on the YouTube videos on our website back in, say, 2010, 2011. But social media is just so easy now, because you can just send them the link to the page and they can, on their own free time, they can check out what you have. And most of the time, after you had kind of already figured out what they need, right, with stormwater management, they come back to you and say, look, I was on your Instagram, and my wife's looking to get this done, and we're thinking about getting this done next summertime, and it's it's just made it easy. So
let's talk about the social media stuff. I wanted to get into technical stuff because you mentioned soils and stuff, but I have your Instagram here in my hand and I'm looking at it, and your posts are, I would say, a lot more technical than most contractors. And when I say technical, like, yeah, there are beauty shots in there, but like your 3 pinned posts are, what's this first one? I mean, you're looking at basically a trench that's flooded in. Then the next one is stormwater reservoir system. Mm-hmm. And next one is basically a picture of a landscaped backyard with the arrows pointing to where are we sending the water, either on the surface or subgrade. Yeah. What's the typical conversation look like with the customer, and how driven is it by these types of posts, this content that you put there? Is that kind of the continuity of, like, someone's looking for you, they see that, they're like, yep, this is the guy. Huh, that's interesting. That sparks a couple questions I think I should ask him. Like, what's your thinking? Why you post that, and what are you hoping it to do for you?
Sure. I think those 3 specific posts, they really identify who we are, right? Especially the one in the middle and the one to the right with the pool with the green stormwater management. Let's go to the one with the pool with the green stormwater management.
Yeah.
That's basically letting people know, like, look, if you're looking to put in an outdoor space with a pool, with plants, and you have a drainage issue, right? Whether it's, just standing water, or maybe you got wetlands behind your house, we can fix that. And this is how we can fix it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I want, when they go on this blog, that's one of the first things I want them to see, right? And, I think that could certainly capture a lot of new leads. The center one is again, there was no landscaping behind that. Actually, there was supposed to be another phase, but I don't know if they're going to do that. But, they had about a foot of water sitting on in their backyard. And that's just to show people, like, look, we can do major drainage projects, right? And this is what we can solve, and this is how we go about our business.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of people, they don't understand. They go, they find you. A lot of times they said, I did a Google search, and they just don't know where to start, right? And then if you bring them here and you start, a lot of times I'll be on the phone with these people. I'll say, hey, look, go to my Instagram, and let's discuss your issue, and I can send them photos at the same time, and it gets them going, it gets them moving, it gets the sales process going, and then they start to understand what's going on, because just talking to them over the phone, you're never going to get your point completely across, right? So I think they always say, speak 1,000 words. But if I was a consumer looking for, whatever, new patio, drainage, I feel like this would help a lot, right? And this would help you get comfortable with a contractor, because nowadays people are just, who do I call? I don't know who to call. What's the difference between this landscaper and that guy? Well, I think once they get to here, you can easily navigate, right? From one to the next.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. And especially you talk to the average homeowner about, like, stormwater management. First of all, I'm very curious how many even understand what stormwater management means until they have a discussion or they start consuming some of your content. And then the second one is, like, the idea of having dry wells or soak away chambers or stormwater retention chambers in my backyard, like that. Unless you're in the industry or someone who has done something similar, you don't know about these things. And I think that's where there's a unique opportunity, because people have the water problem, and that's an increasing number. As urban centers continue to densify, you continue to have an increasing percentage of stormwater management issues. But not only that, you look at the way that developers are building stuff, and you tell me if you disagree or agree with this, but I look at the way that builders are delivering homes, and, like, you're just asking for a stormwater problem in the next few years.
Oh my goodness.
So, totally. What are you seeing?
Oh boy. I feel bad.
Yeah.
A lot of new leads. I'm going to brand new HOA developments that, they'll strip all the good loam and good soil, topsoil off the surface, bring it elsewhere, and then they'll backfill clay on these sites. I mean, and that because, let me give an example. Like, around us, there's several areas that are pretty sandy soil, and the native soil is sandy surrounding. And then within the, these brand new developments, not 10 feet from them, you've got all clay, right? And, that's what the builders are doing. They're essentially, they're trying to save a couple of bucks, but they're really causing these people a lot of drainage issues because they're backfilling clay to grade because they're probably getting the dirt, the soil for free. They're not paying anything.
Well, I mean, if I'm scraping off topsoil and good sandy loam, I'm screening that. I'm selling that.
Exactly.
And the clay is scrap coming from somewhere else, so I'm putting that in as the fill for sure. I'm saving a buck and I'm making a buck. It's twofold. 100%. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, and they're skipping a lot of the stormwater management. Some of these, like you look at some of the engineering plans, you see spec'd in like French drains and. Obviously they have the retention ponds, but swales, and they skip over so many things and somehow get away with it. And there's a lot of new construction that are having stormwater management issues. And
so knowing that, is that something that you intentionally try to target? Like, do you hit with flyers, or do you run like social media or search ads targeting specific areas because that's where all the construction's going on. These guys will have if they don't have an issue today, they'll have an issue by the end of the next 2-3 years.
Yeah. No, I don't.
Not yet.
I hope,
maybe now.
I hope they don't. I feel bad. I mean, when I go
for sure, but
I mean, it's, I mean, they typically find us for the most part. And, and nowadays, like we have, I have my engineer that I'll work with hand in hand. And what it's gotten into now, I'm starting to get a lot more people that bought a property on wetlands and they didn't know it and they didn't realize it and they didn't do a really good wetland delineation, right? And the wetland has expanded closer to the back of their house. They thought it was 100 feet. Now it's only 25 feet. So, obviously wetlands expand over time, but that's where we're getting a lot, and it's getting really, really technical. But a lot of these people are normally calling me and saying, look, I want to build a beautiful landscape, but I'm scared because, they send me pictures of after a storm and they got, 15 inches of water just standing in the backyard for a week, and it's, you can't just, and that's the other part of it. I mean, you got all that red tape and the DEP involved. I mean, there's certain things that you can and can't do. So you got to be really careful. But I would tell you that's became maybe 10% of our business is people who are surrounding wetlands.
So what's the process look like? Like when you meet with a client and I guess like we're deciding to take the next step. I don't know if there's a deposit and then I have to do like a soil study or something. Like, how does it work? I've called you and like now you're coming out to my house. What happens next?
Yeah, so you're talking about for stormwater management, right?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's different for both. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's just say they're calling me for stormwater management. Normally, we'll schedule a call first. They'll send photos, send photos, video. I'll get on that, and I can normally give them a ballpark. And through that 15-minute free consult, I can normally, diagnose the issue. We'll go through it. We'll exchange photos back and forth in regards to what I would do, and then I'll give them a ballpark. And then if they want to bring me out on site, normally we have an on-site evaluation fee, whether that's $250 or $500, right? For the most part, I would tell you 75 to 80% pay at that point because they're like, okay, price sounds good. I'm serious. I want to bring this guy out, right? So that's for the stormwater process. For landscape, hardscape, it's a little bit different. Normally, we'll just jump on a quick call, figure out what you're looking to do. What do we need? Do we need a building architect or not? If we need a building architect, most of the time we'll need a civil engineer, right? I'll give them costs first, and then I'll give them a ballpark and say, look, you're looking, just like we talked, between $75,000 or $150,000. And they'll decide whether or not they want to engage us with our landscape architect and start the design process. If not, there's really no need, it's just a waste of everybody's time for me to come out there and start talking.
Okay. So you're establishing out the gate, like, okay, if we're talking minimum of this, that involves this.
Yes.
Are we serious or not?
Yep. And don't get me wrong, there's smaller jobs. Like not every job is 75 to 100.
No, it's an average. So that means there's higher ones and there's lower ones.
Exactly. So it might be a $20,000, $25,000 job, but do the same thing. Hey, we still need a design, kind of go through the whole process for them.
You see any specific changes this year from last or the year before?
Yeah, it is definitely slowed down quite a bit. I mean, we knew it wasn't going to be crazy like that from COVID. But it is, and that's, I think that's a lot of guys. I mean, for the most part, from what I'm hearing throughout the industry, whether that be paving, concrete, asphalt, whatever, everybody's slowed down. You see the advertisements jumping up on social media in front of you. Now guys that weren't advertising, a lot more advertising. But I think the people who have the money are spending it. And, obviously the people that had the money before are kind of pump the brakes a little bit.
The fact that you've become so specialized and you've become that guy, that perception of two things, slower market and more marketing by effectively your competitors, does that keep you up at night, or are you feeling pretty good because your pipeline is full of people who really, they need you, not someone else, and they know that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always striving. I honestly, like, you're always going to have competition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I mean, it keeps pushing you harder. I mean, I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, because there's been a lot of times in the past, like getting this business off the ground. Yeah, that kept me up at night. I mean, really some difficult times, especially back in 2008. Nobody's spending anything. I mean, now it's not that bad. I mean, we're very fortunate, but back in those days, and especially that was before the social media era of Instagram, Facebook.
No one's spending money, and you can't reach them, even if they wanted to. Yeah,
correct. And it wasn't like it was back then, right? These outdoor living is like the norm now.
Yeah, now 75 to 150 is like, yeah, okay.
That's the norm.
Neighbors
like,
too,
Exactly. Like you almost had to convince people back in those days. Hey, this is going to be awesome, and this is going to be a beautiful place. They're like,
it's going to add value to your home and increase the resale value. Like you have to give them a list of arguments to drop like 5 square feet of pavers in.
Yeah, very, very hard, and people just not valued it. I mean, this is the patio. We don't want to pay a lot of money for this, and I was very, very close back then and just saying maybe this is not the right trade for me.
Yeah.
Nobody values this. How am I going to make any money?
Yeah.
It's like I may as well go in the union and get benefits and be done at 3:00 every day and make 80, 90 grand back then. But I stuck to it because I always loved it. I went to school for it, and I said, you know what? Let's just be patient. And now that outdoor living is the norm, and everything is like in front of people on social media, it's valued a lot more than it was.
So it was worth the wait.
Totally.
This episode is brought to you by Hardscaper.com. The Hardscaper mission is to empower industry professionals with the skills, inspiration, and confidence they need to take their businesses to new heights. Struggling with training programs for your team? Looking for helpful tips to build a better company? Subscribe today to gain access to hours of interactive on-demand Hardscape construction and business courses for free. Check out Hardscaper.com. Speaking of the market being slower means what exactly? Like less phone calls? It's tougher to close a sale. The price of the average project is lower. All of the above. Like what are the symptoms of a slower market that you're experiencing?
I would say the calls, and I would say like as many designs, even coming out of last year. I mean, we had a ton of designs, and now that has, this is for the large jobs. It has pumped the brakes for our stormwater management business. That doesn't go up and down with the economy, right? That kind of like if they got an issue,
it's just a problem.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting about it is regardless, like I need it. When I need it, I need it. Like I can't wait like, oh, well, we'll do it next year. No, like my backyard is flooded.
The backyard's flooded. We got to get it done. So like that has always been fantastic, even during 2008, 2009, 2010. Which is around the time we kind of started saying, look, we got to change this model, because if if nobody wants to do this type of work, like that's a problem. Like we have to figure out, something that's good. We got to figure out cash flow, right? So, so I would say that the hardscape and the landscape, the jobs, they're probably, I'd say the dollar value is still the same, right? Like the price doesn't, I mean, the price is the price of anything. The price still has gotten higher.
Okay.
Because the demand of labor in general, not just throughout our industry, throughout, whatever
Anything.
plants, it just went up. So that is maintained the same. It's just, I would say the volume has slowed down.
So volume has slowed down, the average project about the same, therefore the average price of a project about the same, if not higher, because of everything going on. But
Exactly.
What I really like with what we just covered there with the stormwater management side is basically you have a diversification of your services that you offer, and you have a significant portion of your revenue that is generated by something that is not as variable. It's not as subject to market and economic conditions. It is just a standard thing. It always occurs. It always happens. It always needs to be addressed. The other side of your business is a little more variable, but you've managed by sticking to the steady side to create a niche for yourself that feeds the other one. That's what's really special about your business. That's why I wanted to get you on the show, because I think like that's something that a lot of contractors, I'm not saying that they need to do exactly what you're doing, but a lot of contractors have some part of their business that they're probably pretty darn good at, that they don't lean on heavily enough to build out a reputation and a brand for themselves. And I find, at least in conversation with guys, that it's kind of out of fear. Like you want to be able to be everything for everyone. And by doing that, you're not differentiating yourself enough, because everyone comes across as everything for everyone.
Yeah.
And you're not trying to do that at all.
Yeah. No, you have to definitely step back and feel and determine how you can provide value for people, right? And by doing that, and again, we just happened to fall in that. We were able to, again, execute and be able to offer, and whether we're going to go back in the hardscape was still to be determined. But we were really, really focused on drainage and making sure people didn't have these yard problems anymore. And it kind of worked out where I was able to combine the two down the line. We didn't figure on that. We didn't say, hey, let's draw it out. This is how it's going to be. But it's to figure out how you can provide value and specialize in something, and just not say, hey, yeah, we're going to offer all of these services, because I think that's what everybody do. Hey, yeah, we can do power washing, and we can clean up your leaves and lawn cutting and all the services, which is fantastic if that's what you want to add. But you're going to have a lot of competition.
Mm-hmm. And the people with money generally want to hire the best at the thing that they need.
Exactly.
So that's what you've positioned yourself as. You have this issue, I'm the best at it. So that's great. So I want to kind of shift gears a little bit for the last part of our conversation here, and just talk about drainage and stormwater management. A little more of a technical conversation. Not too technical, but just technical enough in the sense that what are the... Because I'm suspecting not only are you getting a lot of calls for jobs that are like new home construction or backyards that were never touched and they have this water issue. I'm pretty sure you're also getting calls for a lot of jobs that were not built properly and now have stormwater management issues. They have drainage issues and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying like, hey, let's name some guys who don't know what they're doing. That's not where I'm going with this. But what I am curious is like, what are some of the things that seem to be common mistakes in hardscape or landscape construction that lead to issues that ultimately are giving you business right now?
Yeah, I would tell you one of the biggest issues, and this is when we even got first in there, is settling pavers, right? Mm-hmm. That was the biggest one. That was, as a matter of fact, I've been out on a few calls where And this was one, it was a raised patio. It blew out the back foundation wall. Because of the load itself. But settling pavers is usually the biggest one. That creates either A, a standing water issue, right? Or B, that creates some sort of hydrostatic pressure trapped behind a foundation wall. It eventually causes it to bow buckle over time.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why we always say to build the raised structures independent of the home. Yeah, 100%. Exactly for that. So you're not putting any load on a wall that was not designed to be load bearing. Not load bearing in that direction. Vertically, yes. Horizontally, no.
Yeah, that's big. I don't always build, depending on the project, depending what our building architect specs, right? But usually for, interlocking concrete pavers, we won't always build an independent wall. But what I will do is make sure that wall is reinforced and properly waterproofed, and making sure I'm putting and I'll make sure the wall is right first, right? If the wall's got major issues, then I'm going to tell them, like, look, this has got to be pinned, and repaired first and foremost before we put anything against this wall. And then we'll make sure when we're building the pavers that we get all of the water away, right? And then we have French drains or whatever outside in the yard that take that water away from the house.
Do you find that a lot of the settling paver issues are because of water causing it, or water is there because now it has settled and it was an issue with compaction, improper base thickness, or too hard to tell because it's just a mess when you get there?
Yeah, it's typically too hard to tell, but I think some guys underestimate where they're working, right? And that's why I always say soil testing is huge. So, I know a lot of the towns around our way, and I know where the heavy dense clay is. But, I do know when we're working in those towns that we're always going to have to do a over dig. And, let's just say we're going to do, normal base for a patio is, 5 to 7 inches. I might do a 10-inch base there, right? Because we're excavating and we're taking out, we're going to take out that wet clay and do a larger over dig than I think most guys would do. But they're usually the biggest ones is, guys are underestimating the problems in clay. And, not really going in there, having your research, having your soil test, knowing your boundaries. Is there wetlands somewhere around? That's key. With sandy soils, you can kind of get away with a lot of stuff, right?
Good structural soils, they drain well.
Well. You're not going to have a lot
more
of
forgiving.
Yeah, very forgiving. So that I would say that's the biggest. That's the biggest issues.
So let me ask you on the soil testing part. I mean, I've been at Deco Block for almost 20 years. I've heard Paver Pete talking about soil testing for almost 20 years, and still a ton of contractors push back on that and say, I've been working in this area for a decade. I know what I'm dealing with. And you've been doing it for 20 years in the same area. So why is it so important to do it, even though you're working on the same street that you did 3 houses on the street, you know what you're dealing with? Why is it still so critical for you to do the soil testing, and what do you get out of it?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, honestly, there's been many times I thought, oh, no, this is loam here. This is sandy soil. No, Steve, there's actually 4 to 6 feet. There's a barrier of clay here. We don't know how it got there, but it's there, and that's super critical, right? Because that's how you're going to plan around this, to say, are we going to just try to perk everything in here, right? Are we going to try to put number 57 open grade it and just allow it to perk? If it's going to hit a clay barrier, we got to get creative, right? Put a pipe. So you don't want to get people to spend the money. And there are jobs I don't need a soil test, right? There are some jobs where I'm like, look, we're not going to have any issues down here. We're in farmland. We're fine. But there's definitely times where, even my mason, he's awesome, and he's been in the industry forever. But sometimes we'll go back and forth. He'll say, "Oh, that's clay," and I'm like, "This is not clay." I said, "Look at, you kind of do the finger test, the curl." Yeah. I said, "This is mostly you're saying clay by the color." I'm like, "It's not clay. This is more loam." So yeah, you got to do the test. I mean, the best bet you send it to a soil scientist to actually get the correct readings, to know what you're dealing with all the way 6 to 8 feet down. I mean, people might say, well, that's overkill. Look, you want this thing to last, it's better to spend $1,000 extra on a job and have everything you need ahead of time.
And be sure.
Exactly.
So what's that test look like? Because I know most contractors are not doing this testing. So what is the process that I should expect as a contractor?
So typically our engineer comes out and does it. He's just got a little mini excavator, and he'll excavate, and he'll have his, his little things that he has, and he'll, again, take a tape, measure down, and he'll, every time he lifts a certain part of his excavation out, he'll lay that all out for, 2 feet deep, 4 feet deep, 6 feet. He'll lay it all out.
He's taking the layers out and laying
Correct.
them out.
Taking the layers out, and then he'll send it to a soil scientist. And then typically it takes a couple of weeks, and, the results will come back, and it'll tell us what it is, right? Sandy loam or clay or sandy clay. But now certain townships around here require it, and they want their township engineer to be on site when it's being done.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
what that means is like the water management has become such an issue for the city that now they want to be involved because those issues cause very expensive issues down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. They cause really, really big problems. And again, that's one township, but I do feel like a lot of the other smaller townships
they copy each other. If it's working for one, they're like, oh yeah, well, I should do the same thing because we're paying out the yin yang here trying to fix all these water issues, and then we can just put the onus on the homeowner on who they hire.
Always, yeah.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. And the other part of it is impervious coverage is always a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And depending where you're at, like with towns, like you go down the shore, down at the beach, they are crazy about impervious. Like certain township will have a little bit of flexibility, right? Like they might make you go for a variance and say, all right, you want this, we're going to give you it, but we want a beefy stormwater management system. We want to make sure you're not going to flood any of the neighbors when you max impervious coverage or exceed that. Certain townships down the shore are like, ain't happening. You stay under it. You can't go over it by, a percentage, nothing. You have to stay under that coverage. So yeah, depending on the township where you're at, and obviously we work in so many townships, so you start to get the understanding of who's going to require what. This way, when a client calls you, you know the process ahead of time. Hey, we know this, that they're going to require a soil test X, Y, and Z, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's, hey, we're not going to need any of that. It's going to be real simple. We're going to get in and out. We might need a permit to, have an inspection when we cut the curb to discharge water in the street.
Yeah. But I think it's still a worthwhile thing to explore and to try to integrate in your business, because if it's not happening today, again, unless you're out in rural, whatever, where like you're not going to see this for 10 years, but if you're anywhere near a major city, it already exists. It's just maybe not being enforced as strongly in that part of town or in that town that you're in. But this is one of the things that we're covering at Showcase this year. One of the projects that we built was in Nashville, and we had to, because they were putting in a pool and a certain percentage of impervious space, we had to have almost an excessive amount of stormwater management, including surface drains and permeable pavement, in order to just be able to proceed with the project. So an understanding of what soil type we're dealing with becomes a requirement. So, and permeable pavement is a big part of it. It's not a magic pill, but it is a major part of it, because when you're faced with the limitations on pervious surfaces, or impervious surfaces, permeable pavement is often accepted. And that's where, we work a lot with our own engineers in-house, and we can provide a lot of technical data, and then that gets presented to the city and it gets approved for the permitting and all that. Yeah. But it's something to really pay attention to, because it can give you, you're talking about the importance of adding value for the customer. That's one of the ways that you can do it. Like the city is saying you can't. I have a way that you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hit it on the nose. I mean, honestly, that has gotten better over the years, because when I was trying to introduce some permeable paper about 12, 13, 14 years ago, they're like, that is way too new. For us, it's considered impervious. Any paving is considered. But what they're doing now, certain townships are, at least what I'm seeing, right? The surface of the pavers impervious However, the gap in between that, whatever percentage that is permeable. So they're still not saying let's just say it's a 500 square foot patio. They're not going to say, oh, well, 500 square feet is, permeable.
No, they're saying 5% or 7%, whatever
And that's what they're having now. I've gotten past some townships where, look, this is what it is. This is what, let's say maximum impervious is 40%. And my engineer gives me back and said, Steve, you're at 43.5%. Like, look, I don't know what you're going to do. You can try. And we've submitted it, and they came back and say, look, we love what you're doing with this green stormwater management. We love how it's working. You provided the soil data, right, to show us, like, you're going with mostly sandy loam. We're going to let you do it, and that's the key. And, like, now with something that might have never happened before, now you're able to, with all the correct information, you're allowed to get past that.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, man. Let's wrap things up because we covered a lot of stuff here, and I think there's a ton of great stuff from a market positioning standpoint, differentiation standpoint, client perception standpoint, diversification of services standpoint, and even we got some technical stuff. So this is a nice, good 360 episode here. Is there anything that you want to add that contractors listening might want to keep in mind when looking at everything that we talked about here?
Yeah, I would obviously, if they're going to go in here and the goal is to do outdoor living or paving, is that stormwater management is always your first thing. I mean, you're leaving money on the table if you're not going out, and that's like one of the first things that you should be looking at, right? So not only that you're putting your job in jeopardy by not exploring that, but you're leaving whatever, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on the table. So I would probably recommend that to anybody out there. If you're going and going to attack this that way, I think that should be one of the first things that you bring up to the homeowner.
Very good. Okay, well, he's Stephen Lisk on Instagram, Stephen with a PH. Website is lisklandscape.com. And a lot of people like to reach out to our guests with follow-up questions. So I hope that's okay because I just said it.
It's all good.
Usually I ask first, but I don't know. I got excited there. And I think this was a fantastic episode. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and join us. And like I said, at this year's 2024 Hardscaper Showcase events, drainage solutions, all the different types of drainage solutions that tie directly into hardscape construction. We're going to be covering those in great depth. So hopefully we can, hopefully we don't miss anything since you're the expert. Hopefully we got everything covered there with Pete and the guys.
Totally. And I'll be there. I think it's going to be great. I look forward to it. It was a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And until next time, everybody, work hard, pave harder, and we'll see you next week on the Hardscape Growth Show. You've been listening to Hardscape Growth, a podcast for hungry professionals who want to grow their businesses and level up. Each episode is all about taking the next step in running your business, so make sure you never miss a show by subscribing on your favorite podcast player. And if you're finding this information to be useful, help others in your position discover us by giving us a star rating and leaving a comment. We'll see you next week.